Okay, let's get started. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Great to be diving in again.
Today, we're really digging into something absolutely fundamental. Vocabulary.
Yep. Words, words, words.
But not just any random list. We're focusing specifically on the words from Day 3, Part 2 of your study materials.
That's right.
Think of this as, well, less about just rote memorization.
Definitely not about flashcards today.
More about really understanding how these words work, how they connect, how they actually, function in sentences, especially those tricky exam sentences.
Exactly. We've got the list here. Definitions, good examples, and those all-important true exam sentences. Our goal isn't just reading definitions out loud.
No, that wouldn't be much of a deep dive.
Right. We're using these examples like a map. To see the words in their natural environment, we want to help you build sort of a network in your head.
A conceptual network, yeah. Connecting words to meanings, sure, but also to contexts, to feelings, to actions.
That's the idea. That's how you go from just knowing a word exists to really commanding it, being able to use it, understand it instinctively.
And that command, that's what really pushes your reading comprehension up a level, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When you get the subtle differences, say, between synonyms or how a word shifts its meaning depending on what it's paired with.
Like who it hangs out with in the sentence.
Exactly. Then you start grasping the author's real intention, the nuances. It's like,
Getting X-ray vision for the text.
yeah, something like that. So lean in, really listen, try to picture these words. Imagine seeing them in articles you read. Ask yourself, how do they shape the message?
Consider this our joint exploration, finding ways to make this vocabulary truly work for you.
Okay, let's jump in.
Right. First up, we have a little group that seems to touch on ideas of influence, maybe, or desire, words related to taking or wanting something.
And an interesting place to start, the source groups levy, envy, and jealous together.
Yeah, which is interesting because, as you say, they feel quite different in some ways. Let's start with levy, L-E-V-Y.
Okay.
The source says it's a noun, a charge, a tax, and also a verb, meaning to impose a tax or fine.
Right. Two forms. Same core idea.
The first example sentence given is, it was a local tax levied by the council on the occupiers of land and buildings.
Okay, let's break that down a bit. Levied, past tense, passive voice here. It tells us the tax was imposed.
Okay.
And the phrase levied by the council is key. It tells us who did the imposing.
The authority, in this case, the council.
Exactly. And then on the occupiers of land and buildings tells us who it was imposed upon.
The target.
Right. So even without getting bogged down in grammar terms, that structure levied by X on Y, it signals that an authority, X needs, is doing something financial to a specific group, Y.
That pattern is really useful. Authority imposes something on a target.
Yeah.
And here, the something is a local tax.
Precisely. Now, let's contrast that, or rather compare it with the true exam sentence provided for levy. It's a bit more complex. A judge has now overruled the city's decision to stop levying fines, ordering them reinstated.
Okay, lots going on there. First thing I notice, it's levying fines here, not taxes.
Good spot. That's important.
Right.
The core idea, authority imposing a charge, it holds. But the type of charge is different. It's a penalty, a fine.
And the context is different, too. It's a legal decision involving a judge overruling the city.
Right. And look at the structure again. Stop levying fines. Here, levying is the action the city decided to stop.
So the city used to impose fines, then they decided no more, but the judge said, you have to start again.
Exactly. The judge ordered the fines, the ones that were previously levied, to be reinstated, brought back.
So levy works for taxes, it works for fines. The common thread is an official body and authority requiring payment.
That's the key insight. It signals an official imposition of a financial burden, whether it's a tax from the council or fines ordered by a judge. Understanding this helps you cut through the jargon in, say, legal texts, government documents, even historical accounts.
Got it. Okay, so from imposing things on others, let's shift to, well, wanting what others have. We've got envy and jealous.
Common feelings, often confused.
Let's start with envy, E-N-V-Y. The source says it's a feeling of discontent or covetousness, wanting what someone else has, basically. Possessions, qualities, luck. Can be a noun or a verb.
Okay.
The example sentence is, they looked with envy at her latest purchase.
Looked with envy. That's a very common phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, it tells you how they looked.
It describes the manner of looking. It wasn't just a glance. It was a look colored by that feeling, that desire for what she had.
And at her latest purchase tells you exactly what sparked the envy. They saw the thing she bought, wanted it to. Covetousness, like the definition said.
Paints a clear picture. The source also lists the adjective form envious, meaning feeling or showing envy.
So if they looked with envy, they were feeling envious. Makes sense.
Right. The adjective describes the person. The noun names the feeling. Now, let's look at jealous. Jealous.
Okay.
The source lists this as an adjective. The main meaning here, based on the grouping, is feeling or showing envy. It does mention other meanings like being protective or suspicious of rival.
Right, like a jealous boyfriend or something.
Exactly. But the examples here seem to focus on that overlap with envy. The example sentence is, she's jealous of my success.
Okay, the key pattern there seems to be jealous of something.
Good catch. Just like envy often pairs with at when looking, jealous frequently uses of, followed by the thing that's triggering the feeling. Here it's my success.
So comparing the examples, looked with envy at X, be jealous of X.
And while, linguists and psychologists might draw fine lines, envy is wanting what someone else has. Jealousy often involves a fear of losing something you have to someone else.
Like that protective rivalry thing.
Right. But here, in this study material, they seem presented very closely. Both examples focus on wanting something another person possesses or has achieved.
Yeah, the purchase, envy, and the success, jealous. The core feeling is that discontent because someone else has something good.
That seems to be the focus here. And we also get the noun form jealousy. The example for that is, jealousy is not part of his makeup.
Not part of his makeup. I like that phrase. It implies jealousy isn't just a passing feeling for him, but...
like a personality trait. Or rather, the lack of that trait.
Right. It's not just that he isn't feeling jealous now, it's that he's fundamentally not a jealous person.
Exactly. It elevates it from just an emotion to a characteristic. So the adjective jealous describes the feeling, while the noun jealousy can describe the trait itself.
Okay, let's quickly recap this first group. Levy, authority imposing a financial charge, like a tax or fine.
Keyword.
Authority. Then envy and jealous. Feelings about wanting what someone else has, often seen in phrases like look with envy at or be jealous of.
And noticing those patterns, those typical pairings, really helps you decode sentences faster. It tells you if you're reading about official actions or personal feelings.
Yeah, that feels crucial for understanding why characters do things in stories, or maybe analyzing social issues in articles.
It absolutely is. These words are powerful signals about power, emotion, and relationships.
Okay, ready to shift gears dramatically.
Nicely done. Yes, let's move into the world of drama.
This next group includes drama, dramatic, drastic, tragedy, and comedy. Seems like we start with the theater, but then move out into the real world.
It's a really interesting progression in meaning, from art forms to describing, significant events or changes.
Let's start with the root word, drama. D-R-A-M-A. The source gives two main ideas, plays and theater, or exciting unexpected events.
Okay.
The first example uses the theater sense. He knew nothing of Greek drama.
Pretty straightforward. Greek drama, that specific category of plays from ancient Greece. You'd see this usage in texts about literature, history, theater studies.
Right. And the true exam sentence builds on that. A native literary drama had been created.
Okay, so again, drama means plays, theater. But notice the adjectives. Native and literary.
Native suggests it's from a specific place. Local. Literary implies written down. Maybe meant to be read too.
Exactly. So this sentence, probably from some kind of literary history, is talking about the emergence of a specific type of theater linked to a place and in written form.
So the insight here is that drama isn't just plays in general, but can refer to specific types like Greek drama or this native literary drama.
Precisely. Understanding that is key if you're reading about arts, history, or cultural development.
Oh.
And the source also lists dramatist, the person who writes dramas.
Okay. Now the adjective dramatic, D-R-A-M-A-T-I-C, clearly related but often used more broadly, right? The source mentions striking, significant, sudden.
Yes, that non-theater sense is probably the more common one in everyday use.
The first example shows this. The announcement had a dramatic effect on house prices.
Dramatic effect on X. That's a really common structure.
And it doesn't mean the announcement was like a play.
No.
It means the effect, the impact on prices, was big, striking, significant, maybe sudden. Prices didn't just creep up, they jumped or fell noticeably.
Exactly. A big attention-grabbing change. You see this use of dramatic all the time, describing events, changes, results. Now, the true exam sense for dramatic brings us back a bit closer to the original meaning. Poems can be dramatic, funny, beautiful, moving, and inspiring.
Ah, okay. Here, dramatic is describing the poem itself.
Right. What does it mean here?
Well, maybe like it evokes strong emotions, has conflict, tells a story vividly, like a scene from a play might.
I think that's it, exactly. It has the qualities of drama, emotional intensity, maybe conflict, vivid presentation.
So this is a key point. Dramatic can mean significant, striking when talking about effects or changes.
Like dramatic increase, dramatic fall.
But it can mean like a play when describing art forms like poems or maybe a performance, a scene.
Precisely. Context is everything. What is dramatic describing? An event or a piece of art. That's your clue.
The source also gives us the adverb dramatically, D-R-A-M-A-T-I-C-A-L-L-Y, meaning strikingly.
And the true exam sentence for that is, the bodies playing major professional sports have changed dramatically over the years.
Changed dramatically. That's another really common phrase.
It's very common and very powerful. It signals a huge change, a fast change, a really noticeable change.
So this sentence, maybe from sports science or sociology,
Probably.
it's emphasizing just how much athletes' physiques have transformed. Not just a little bit, but dramatically.
It signals the scale and speed of the change. So when you see phrases like increase dramatically, decrease dramatically, change dramatically in a text, you know the author wants you to notice a major shift.
To give you that sense of magnitude.
Right.
Now, closely related, we have drastic, adjective. Similar to dramatic because it implies a big change, but the source says extreme, sharp, severe, violent. Sounds harsher.
It often does carry a stronger, sometimes more negative connotation. Think extreme measures or severe results.
The first example. There is a drastic reduction in their standard of living.
Drastic reduction. That sounds really bad.
Yeah, not just a noticeable drop, a severe drop, an extreme fall. Their standard of living has plummeted.
It emphasizes the severity. Now, the second example, the true exam sentence. Against a backdrop of drastic changes in economy and population structure.
Drastic changes, again. Okay, so if we compare, dramatic changes could just be big, noticeable shifts. But drastic changes sounds more like severe shifts, extreme ones, maybe even painful ones.
I think that's a good way to put it. Dramatic often highlights the impact or noticeability, how striking it is. Drastic often highlights the severity or extremity, how harsh or severe the change or the measure taken is.
So if a government takes drastic measures, it suggests they're doing something really extreme, maybe unpopular.
Often, yes, that's the connotation. Understanding that difference helps you pick up on the author's tone and the true nature of the change they're describing. It's subtle, but important.
Definitely. Okay, let's loop back to the theater roots with tragedy and comedy. Tragedy and comedy.
The classic pairing.
They refer to types of plays, usually based on the ending, sad for tragedy, happy for comedy, but also broader ideas of misfortune or humor. The source gives one true exam sentence that actually uses both. Europe was witnessing the passing of the religious drama and the creation of new forms under the incentive of classical tragedy and comedy.
Okay, this sentence is clearly from a historical text, right? About theater history.
Yeah, passing of religious drama, creation of new forms, classical tragedy and comedy.
So here, tragedy and comedy are used in that specific historical sense, referring to the ancient Greek and Roman forms that influenced later European theater. It's about art history, specific genres.
So seeing these words paired with things like classical or discussions of historical periods tells you the text is using them as specific genre labels.
Exactly. Now, the example for comedy is a bit more modern. The show combines theater with the best of stand-up and sketch comedy.
Okay. Here, comedy refers to types of performance meant to be funny. Stand-up comedy, sketch comedy.
It shows how the word functions both in historic literary contexts and in contemporary entertainment contexts. The source also mentions comic as the adjective related to comedy, or just funny.
So putting this drama group together, drama, tragedy, comedy can be theater genres, sometimes extending to real events.
Though maybe less common for drama itself in this context, yeah.
Then dramatic and drastic describe changes or events. Dramatic means striking, significant, or like a play. Drastic means severe, extreme, often harsher.
That's a good summary. And the key takeaway for you, the learner, is always context. Is dramatic describing a play or the stock market?
Right. Is drastic describing a severe policy or just a big change in someone's mood? Look at the surrounding words.
These words are really powerful for describing intensity in art, emotions, world events. Paying attention to how they're used lets you really grasp the author's intended meaning.
Okay, let's move on.
Right.
From describing things, we're now going to words about making things known publicly.
Ugh, the announcement words.
Our next group is words of public statement. Declare, advertise, and advertiser.
Different ways information gets out there. Formal statements, commercial messages.
Let's start with declare. D-E-C-L-A-R-E. The source says it means to announce something formally or publicly, or just state something firmly.
Okay, formal or firm.
First example, he will probably have to declare bankruptcy.
That's a classic example. Declare bankruptcy isn't just saying you're broke. It's a formal legal process.
A public statement with serious consequences.
Exactly. It highlights that formal, official sense of declare. Now, the true exam sentence gives another formal context. The order also declared that state and local governments couldn't regulate broadband providers either.
Okay, here the thing doing the declaring isn't a person, it's an order. Like a document.
Probably. A government order, a regulation, a court ruling. The document itself declared something, stated it officially within its text.
So the order declared that means this is an official statement or rule being laid out in that document.
Precisely. So when you're reading official texts, laws, treaties, court decisions, policy papers, and you see declare that, you know you're looking at a key authoritative statement. That's the insight. Declare signals official pronouncements.
It's not just saying something, it's stating it officially, with authority.
Right. And the noun form, naturally, is declaration, a formal statement.
Okay. Next, advertise.
Yeah.
A-D-V-E-R-T-I-S-E. This one feels more specific. Making a product or service known, usually to sell it.
Yeah, the commercial angle.
The first example is very direct. If you want to attract customers, you need to advertise.
Simple, clear. Advertising is presented as the necessary tool for business promotion. Goal, get customers.
The true exam sentence shows a slightly different angle. Skin moisturizers are advertised as part of morning beauty rituals.
Ah, this is interesting. It's not just saying they advertise moisturizers. It tells you how they're advertised.
Yeah, advertised as part of something.
It points to the marketing strategy. They're framing the product within a specific lifestyle or routine morning beauty rituals.
So this sentence probably comes from a text about what? Marketing, consumer culture.
Could be. Marketing techniques, social trends, how products are positioned. Understanding advertise here helps you see that the text is analyzing promotion and public perception. The insight, advertise, signals commercial intent.
Got it. And the noun is advertisement, the actual ad itself.
Right. Which brings us to the last word in this group, advertiser. A-D-V-E-R-T-I-S-E-R. The person or company doing the advertising.
Okay. The true exam sentence is, it is not yet clear how advertisers will respond.
So this shifts the focus to the agents, the entities behind the ads.
The ones paying for them, creating them.
Exactly. This sentence is likely from a business context, maybe media analysis, talking about industry reactions to something, new rules, market shifts, whatever.
So understanding who the advertisers are is key to understanding what that text is actually discussing.
So let's quickly wrap this group. Declare, formal official statements or announcements.
Authority.
Advertise, making something known commercially for sales.
Promote.
An advertiser, the person or company doing the advertising.
The agent. Okay. So these words help you figure out the purpose of the communication you're reading. Is it official? Is it commercial?
Absolutely. Recognizing these signals is crucial for classifying the information and interpreting it correctly.
Okay. From public statements, we're going inwards now to feelings, specifically feelings of tiredness.
Ah, yes. The weariness words.
Next group. Words of weariness. Exhaust, fatigue, and weary. Feels like different levels or types of tired.
Indeed. They explore that spectrum, and the examples really help tease out the nuances.
Let's start with exhaust. E-X-H-A-U-S-T. The source gives two main verb meanings. Tire someone out completely or use something up completely.
Okay. Tiring people or using up stuff. It also mentions the noun for car fumes, but let's stick to the verbs for now.
Right. First example uses the use up, meaning within 3 days they had exhausted their supply of food.
Exhausted their supply. That's a really common usage. It means completely gone, depleted.
No food left at all.
Exactly. And it can apply to resources like food, money, fuel, or even abstract things like patience or options. He exhausted his patience.
So key meaning. Used up completely. Gone.
That's one meaning. Now, the true exam sentence shows the other meaning, the tire-out one. They worked until exhausted, lived with few protections, and died young.
Worked until exhausted. Here, exhausted describes the people.
Right. It describes their state after working. They were made completely tired out, utterly drained of energy.
So the work led to this state of extreme tiredness.
It signals total depletion, but of energy, not resources this time.
This is a really important distinction. Exhaust can mean use up resources or tire out people.
And the adjective form, exhausted, describes that state of being completely tired. The source also mentions exhausting, describing the thing that causes the tiredness.
So the work was exhausting, which left them exhausted.
Perfect. Context tells you which meaning is intended. Are we talking about supplies running out or people being worn out?
Got it. Look at what's being exhausted. Okay, next. Fatigue. F-A-T-I-G-U-E.
Okay.
Source defines this mainly as a noun. Extreme tiredness, usually from mental or physical effort.
Right, the state or feeling of being extremely tired.
First example. Driver fatigue was to blame for the accident.
Driver fatigue. Here, fatigue is presented as a cause, a factor. It's the state of tiredness experienced by the driver.
And it led to something bad.
Ah.
Okay, second example. I was dropping with fatigue and could not keep my eyes open.
Dropping with fatigue, that's a very vivid phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, it really emphasizes how severe the tiredness is, like you can barely stand.
Exactly. Here, fatigue is that intense state of exhaustion itself.
So how does fatigue, the noun, compare to exhausted, the adjective?
Good question. Exhausted describes the state someone is in. He is exhausted. Fatigue names the condition or the feeling itself. He suffers from fatigue. He was dropping with fatigue.
So you feel fatigue, you are exhausted.
Generally, yeah. And fatigue as a noun often pops up as a cause or a condition, especially linked to exertion.
Okay, that helps clarify. Now the last one in this group, weary. W-E-A-R-Y.
Weary.
Listed as an adjective. Feeling or showing tiredness. Also can mean tired of something. And it can be a verb too, but the examples focus on the adjective. First example. She suddenly felt old and weary.
Felt old and weary. This suggests maybe more than just physical tiredness.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Weary can sometimes imply a lack of energy, maybe enthusiasm, a bit world-weary, tired of life struggles.
It often carries that slightly deeper, maybe more emotional or prolonged connotation, not just I didn't sleep well, but something heavier.
Okay. Second example. This weary traveler is about to collapse from thirst.
Weary traveler. Here, weary directly describes the traveler.
And while thirst is mentioned, weary still suggests that deep-seated tiredness, maybe from a long, hard journey, affecting the spirit, not just the body.
The source also gives the noun form weariness, the state of being weary, so comparing fatigue and weary.
Both mean tired, but...
Fatigue, the noun, often points to exhaustion from specific effort, physical or mental. Weary, the adjective verb, can suggest a broader, perhaps longer-term tiredness. Feeling worn down, lacking enthusiasm, maybe even tired of something.
So weary might signal a kind of deeper, more enduring tiredness, or even emotional tiredness.
Often, yes. That nuance, that connotation is key. If a character in a story is described as weary, it might tell you more about their mental state than just their physical condition.
Okay, summing up the weariness words. Exhaust, verb, use up completely, or tire out completely, adjective.
Exhausted.
Total depletion.
Fatigue.
Noun, extreme tiredness, often from exertion, the condition itself.
Profit a cause or factor.
Weary, adjective, feeling tired, often suggesting a deeper, longer term, maybe even emotional tiredness, or being tired of something.
Right. Recognizing these shades of meaning helps you understand precisely how tired someone is and maybe why when you're reading.
Okay, our next group is, well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it?
Huh. Yes, this section seems to group words based on, well, maybe just being on the same page of the list.
We start with render, then we get some witness words, moist, damp, humid, and weirdly dump, and then a whole cluster sharing a hum root, humiliate, humanity, humane, humble, and humor.
It's definitely diverse. We'll tackle them one by one, but keep an eye out for those connections, like the root words.
Okay, let's start with render, R-E-N-D-E-R. The source says it has multiple meanings. Make something become, provide, give, return.
A tricky one because it does different jobs.
First example, They rendered assistance to the disaster victims.
Rendered assistance. Okay, this is a very common, quite formal phrase. What does it mean here?
It means they gave help, provided assistance.
Exactly. That's the provide-give meaning. You also see render aid, render a service, render thanks. Always about giving something, often formally.
Okay. Now, the true exam sentence shows a totally different side of render. Suffering is inevitable, but the courage to fight it renders life worth living.
Whoa, okay. How is renders working here? Does courage give life worth living?
Not exactly. It makes life become worth living.
Exactly. That's the make something become meaning. The structure is often render XY, render something an adjective or state. Courage renders life X worth living. Why?
This is so important. Render can mean give or make become. You absolutely have to look at the context.
That's the main insight for render. It's a chameleon. Look at the structure. Is it render noun to someone giving or render noun adjective state, making become? The pattern tells you the meaning.
Okay, moving on to the wetness words. First, moist. M-O-I-S-T. Adjective. Slightly wet, often neutral or positive. First example. The warm, moist air is perfect for growing fruit trees.
Warm, moist air. Sounds pleasant. Good for growth. Moist suggests a beneficial dampness here.
Second example. Water the plants regularly to keep the soil moist.
Keep the soil moist. Again, it's the desired state for healthy plants, positive or neutral connotation. The source also gives moisture, noun, and moisturizer, noun.
Wait, moisturizer? Didn't we just see that?
I think we did.
Yes. Back in the advertise section, skin moisturizers were advertised.
Excellent catch. See? The network is building. The thing being advertised makes skin moist.
Perfect example of how these words connect. Okay, next wet word. Damp. D-A-M-P.
Damp.
Adjective also means slightly wet, but the source suggests it's often unpleasant. Can also be a noun or verb. First example uses the noun. The old house smells of damp.
Ugh. Smells of damp. You can almost smell that musty, slightly moldy scent, right? Here, damp is the condition, the unpleasant wetness itself.
Definitely negative. Second example uses the adjective, the cottage was cold and damp.
Cold and damp. Another class of pairing for describing an unpleasant environment that suggests discomfort, maybe even ill health.
So comparing moist and damp both mean slightly wet.
But the feeling is totally different. Moist, usually good or neutral, plants, air. Damp, usually bad. Old houses, cold cottages, damp clothes.
Connotation is key. Okay, now for the odd one out here. Dump. D-U-M-P.
Yeah, seems out of place with the wetness words.
Primarily a noun, place for waste, or verb, get rid of waste, can also be slang for a bad place. First example, how can you live in this dump?
Okay, that's the informal noun use.
Yeah.
This dump, meaning a really messy, unpleasant place, definitely negative.
Second example uses the verb, any vessel dumping at sea without a license will be prosecuted.
Dumping at sea, that's the action. Disposing of waste, specifically in the ocean. And the context is legal license, prosecuted. Often implies illegal or harmful disposal.
So dump is about disposal, waste, or unpleasant places, not really about the state of being wet itself, even if the stuff being dumped is wet.
Exactly. Conceptually different, probably just grouped here for structural reasons in the list. The insight, dump, disposal, waste, bad place.
Okay, back to wetness, specifically air, humid, H-U-M-I-D, adjective.
Warm air with lots of moisture.
Right, specifically about the atmosphere.
First example, the island is hot and humid in the summer. Hot and humid. Very common description for weather, especially tropical or summer conditions. High temperature, high moisture in the air.
Second example. They were not prepared for the humid heat of the tropical forest.
Humid heat, another common pairing, emphasizing that sticky, oppressive combination of heat and moisture.
So comparing humid to moist and damp.
Humid is only about the air. High moisture content, usually warm. Moist and damp describes surfaces or materials being slightly wet, different domains.
Got it. Humid air, moist soil, damp walls.
Perfect. Now for that fascinating cluster with the hum root, starting with humiliate, H-U-M-I-L-I-A-T-E.
Verb. To make someone feel ashamed or foolish, often publicly.
Right, causing that loss of dignity.
First example. I didn't want to humiliate her in front of her colleagues.
This highlights the action, humiliate her, and the context that makes it worse. In front of her colleagues. The public aspect really matters with humiliation.
Second example is reflexive. How could I humiliate myself like this?
Shows someone doing something that causes themselves to feel ashamed or foolish. So, insight. Humiliate. Cause shame loss of dignity, often publicly.
And we get humiliating,
Yeah.
adjective, and humiliation, noun. Okay, now, humanity. Humanity.
Another word.
Source gives two meanings. The human race, or the quality of being humane, kindness.
Two very different ideas from the same word.
First example, the judge was praised for his courage and humanity.
Okay, here, humanity clearly means that positive quality, kindness, compassion, benevolence, an ethical virtue.
Right. Now, the true exam sentence. Only when humanity began to get its food in a more productive way was there time for other things.
And here, humanity obviously means
The whole human species.
Sure.
Humankind, as in throughout history.
exactly, used in context of history and evolution, global issues. So the key insight for humanity, you must use context. Does it mean the species or the virtue of kindness?
Huge difference. Okay, related.
Yeah.
Humane. Humane, adjective. Kind, compassionate, especially to those suffering.
Clearly linked to the kindness sense of humanity.
First example. The animals must be reared in humane conditions.
Humane conditions, meaning conditions that are kind, not cruel, caring for the animal's welfare.
True exam sentence. Laboratory animals receive humane care.
Humane care. Again, kind, compassionate treatment, minimizing suffering. So, insight. Humane describes that quality of kindness, compassion, and action, especially towards the vulnerable. And the opposite is inhumane, cruel.
Okay. Next, word. Humble. Humble, adjective. Two meanings here, too.
Yeah.
Having a modest view of oneself or just ordinary, not special.
Modest personality or ordinary things.
First example, be humble enough to learn from your mistakes.
That's the personality trait. Modesty, recognizing you're not perfect, being open to learning, humble enough to learn, connects those ideas.
True exam sentence gives the other meaning. As a nation, we may be overfunding the quest for unlikely cures while underfunding research on humbler therapies that could improve people's lives.
Humbler therapies, what does that mean?
Simple treatments. Ordinary ones. Not the flashy, high-tech, unlikely cures.
Yeah.
Just basic, maybe less prestigious therapies.
Exactly. Describing something as unassuming, ordinary. So another insight. Humble also has two key meanings. Modest person versus ordinary thing. And notice the root connection to humiliate.
Yeah, both vaguely about being low, maybe.
Yeah.
Low opinion of self versus being lowered in public esteem.
Something like that historically, perhaps. But the modern meanings are very different. Humble, modest, is usually positive. Humiliate is definitely negative. Shows roots aren't always reliable guides.
Absolutely. Okay, last word. Humor. Humour, or humor, U.S. spelling. Noun. Quality of being funny or the ability to appreciate funny things.
The funny bone word.
First example, I can't stand people with no sense of humor.
Sense of humor.
Yeah.
Classic phrase for that ability to get and make jokes.
True exam sentence. You may have a circle of friends who provide constant good humor, help, and companionship.
Good humor. What's that suggesting?
Like cheerfulness, a pleasant, amusing attitude, bringing fun to the group.
I think so. A generally positive, lighthearted disposition. And the adjective is humorous. Funny.
So, reflecting on all these words, humiliate, humanity, humane, humble, humor, it's amazing how different they are.
It really is. Causing shame, the human species, kindness, modesty, being ordinary, being funny, all from that shared root.
The big takeaway here, you absolutely cannot guess the meaning just from the root. You have to learn each word's specific meaning and how it's used in context.
That's it exactly. This section is like a mini lesson in why context is king in vocabulary learning. It covers everything from weather to ethics to personality.
Seriously useful. Okay, final group. Let's talk about mistakes.
Errors, faults, and what happens when things go wrong or aren't acted upon.
Words of error. Error, fault, and default.
Okay, let's distinguish these.
Starting with error. E-R-R-O-R, noun, a mistake. A deviation from what's correct or true.
The mistake itself.
First example. There are too many errors in your work.
Straightforward. Specific mistakes, spelling, grammar, facts points where the work is incorrect.
True exam sentence. Good writing most often occurs when you are in hot pursuit of an idea rather than in a nervous search for errors.
Search for errors. Common phrase in editing, proofreading. Here, errors are those mistakes that spoil good writing. So, insight, error, the specific mistake, the incorrect item.
A typo is an error. A wrong calculation is an error. Got it.
Yeah.
Now, fault, F-A-U-L-T.
Fault.
Noun again, source says, responsibility for a mistake, or R, a weakness, imperfection.
Responsibility or a defect.
First example, it's your own fault for being careless.
Your own fault. That phrase directly assigns blame.
Yeah, the mistake happened because of you. The fault is the responsibility.
Okay, that's one meaning. Second example, I think my worst fault is impatience.
Here, fault isn't responsibility for a specific mistake.
A
It's
character flaw, a personal weakness, an inherent imperfection.
right. The source also gives faulty adjective, having faults, not working right. Example, wouldn't that be faulty products?
Faulty products, meaning products with defects, things wrong with them inherently. So the insight for fault can mean responsibility for an error or an underlying defect weakness in a person or thing.
Okay, comparing error and fault. Error is the mistake. Fault is either who's responsible for the error or the inherent defect that might cause errors.
Well put. One names the mistake, the other points to responsibility or the underlying flaw. Different angles on something being wrong.
Okay. Last one. Default. D-E-F-A-U-L-T.
Default.
Now and again, mostly. Two key meanings. Failure to fulfill an obligation, especially financial, or a pre-selected option in a system, like on a computer, can also be a verb. Fail to fulfill.
Two very distinct meanings again. Failure to act versus standard setting.
Examples use the noun. First one. Mortgage defaults have risen in the last year.
Mortgage defaults, common term in finance economics. What does it mean?
People failing to make their mortgage payments. Failure to fulfill that financial obligation.
Exactly. Signals failure to meet a required payment or duty. Very important in economics and law.
Okay, now the true exam sentence shows the other meaning. Most people stick with default settings.
Default settings. Where do you hear that?
Computers, phones, software. It means the settings that are already chosen for you unless you change them.
Right. The standard, pre-selected option. So, the insight for default. Two totally separate meanings. Failure to pay act or standard setting. Context makes it crystal clear which one applies.
Yeah, finance text versus tech text. It's not really a mistake like error or a weakness like fault. It's either failing to do something required or just the standard option.
And catching that distinction based on context is vital, especially in technical or financial reading.
Okay, let's sum up this last group. Error, the mistake itself.
The wrong thing.
Fault, responsibility for the mistake or an inherent weakness defect.
Blame or flaw.
Default, failure to meet an obligation, often money, or the standard pre-selected option, often tech.
Failure to act or standard state.
Recognizing these differences is crucial for understanding texts accurately, whether they're about psychology, law, tech, or just everyday life.
They help you pinpoint exactly why something isn't right or how a system is set up.
Wow. Okay, that was quite the journey through Day 3, Part 2. We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. From taking and wanting through drama and descriptions, public statements, tiredness, wetness, and humanity, and finally, errors and defaults.
By looking closely at the examples, especially those real exam sentences, comparing the words, checking related forms, the goal was to get beyond just definitions.
Right. To see how these words actually work in sentences, how context shapes them, how they link together to form that mental network we talked about.
Because this deep dive isn't just about knowing the words exist, it's about understanding how authors use them precisely, and how that understanding boosts your reading power.
Absolutely. Getting those nuances, moist versus damp, renders different jobs, defaults, two faces, that's what lets you read complex texts with real confidence.
So the dive continues with you, right?
It has to. Go back to your materials. Look for these words actively in whatever you're reading, articles, books, even online. Notice how they're used out there in the wild.
And maybe try using them yourself. Describe something as drastic or someone's fault.
Yes. The more you encounter and use them in context, the deeper that understanding, that conceptual network becomes.
Definitely. Keep the dive going.
And maybe a final thought to chew on. Think about just how much meaning hinges on choosing exactly the right word. Envy or jealous, dramatic or drastic, error or fault. Authors use these distinctions deliberately.
To convey very specific ideas about feelings, events, responsibilities.
Precisely. So paying attention to these subtle differences isn't just exam prep. It's about learning to read the world and the texts describing it with much greater precision and insight. How will you start noticing those nuances starting today?
That's a great challenge to end on. Thanks so much for guiding us through that vocabulary jungle.
My pleasure. Until next time.